Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be discussing the rapid pace and adoption of telehealth and e-medicine in light of recent events. Specifically, we'll be discussing how communication service providers, or CSPs, are enabling the digital transformation of the healthcare industry. It's about the emergence of AI-powered applications for critical care, an industry perspective on finding their fit to support healthcare, and an insider's view on best practices for CSPs who are seeking to deliver higher levels of service reliability, security, and scale for their healthcare partners, as well as those who are entering in with their own native solutions themselves. I'd like to introduce our panelists. We've got Christophe Maritet, Director of Innovation and Design at Thales North America, and he'll be discussing leading telehealth applications for healthcare providers brought to you by Thales. We've also got Amy Cameron, our Senior Analyst at STL Partners, who will review the current state of telehealth and the potential roles for CSPs in the healthcare industry. And lastly, we've got Field CTO Chris Neisinger from Guavus, who will explore the telecommunication requirements for telehealth, successful implementation, and widespread adoption, especially with the introduction of new technologies such as 5G and edge computing. Thank you, guys. Welcome to today's session. With that, I'd like to proudly hand the mic over to Christophe Maritet, Director of Innovation and Design at Thales North America. Welcome, Christophe.
Hi, Stephen. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. So thanks for having me today. Thanks for the introduction. Truly speaking, I don't come from telco myself. I come from medium to heavy industry. So today, what we thought and what I like is to share the journey, our journey actually, moving from managed services in the most regulated industries to healthcare for enhanced experience. Let's get into it. So first things before I get into the detail of that journey, it's maybe to start by telling you a little bit about who we are. So when you think about Thales digital solution, you think about AI meeting human intelligence. We basically help organization in the most regulated industries, from research to business strategy, and deploy AI in across the enterprise. And what we mean by AI is really augmented intelligence. We do not believe in black box AI. What we see and what we know in these regulated industries, such as aerospace, space, defense, mobility, it's that human knowledge is at the core of the decision. That tacit knowledge, that sixth sense, is at the core of the decision. So now, what we mean by augmented intelligence is really leveraging the power of algorithm, the power of data, and bring it just a dash of human intelligence to give automated insights. I mean, basically prediction to fill a missing information. So we basically do that by injecting trust by design, co-creating the solution, mixing scientists and domain experts, people from the field. And we also try to focus on explainable and AI that you can certify, so that we make sure that the human feel amplified by the machine and not the opposite. So this is where we come from, as I say, very regulated industries. And lately, we do realize actually that some of the value we brought to these industries were also very valuable for healthcare. And this is how. So when you think about healthcare, immediately I think you think past patients, right? Humans, people, you think practitioners. And I think many people will acknowledge the fact that healthcare is an industry regulated for sure, but also where the human knowledge, the human expertise is really key. So, like I said, when we were looking at healthcare ourselves, we were like, today we ourselves across space for diagnosis assistance, aerospace to visualize and manage the pilot fatigue and stress, security for training reasons. We already have the human as a central piece of our safety critical systems, and still human remains very accountable for the behavior of the system, the key component of the decision, and still yet a very complex system. You have a multiple and then the dynamic dimensions of the human, psychological, biological, physical. So basically, we ask ourselves, leveraging cognitive science and AI, how we could, from judgmental bootstrapping to human sensing technologies, how we could basically augment the capabilities of human to reduce the limitation of humans in this very unpredictable space, basically stepping into real-time responsiveness systems and digital twins. Now, I think most of us will agree that in regulated industry, we are dealing with two-speed kind of AI transformations, but we were surprised to see that although that we start from very extreme environments, we then realized that in less regulated environment, but very remote environments, such as maritime domain, we felt the same needs. And basically, that comes from these spaces where information access to expertise is very limited. So again, when we experience, as the world did, this pandemic and COVID-19 situation, we try to step back and reflect on how could our technologies be repurposed to help the fight against the COVID. And then we try to focus on the key component, key technologies, key solutions of our portfolios. Just to give you a concrete real-life example, the SensorBurst solutions, which basically is basically we are talking about sensing and interpretation framework. So what we want to do is to build a common picture of operation and be able to track the real time, the functional state of the human, which is again a key component of the systems, and where we have very little information compared to all the other components of the system in most critical systems when you think health monitoring, health system monitoring system, and so on. So anyway, we were like, okay, this system right now is covering at least five physiological components like fatigue, stress, mental workload, kinetic activities, for domain like jet pilots to basically help training and responsiveness test for these pilots, and the kind of team collaboration. So we are like, okay, can we see ourselves in these technologies, and also on the reason that brought this technology to life, reason to believe that the healthcare could benefit from that. And we were like, the key game changer in this system are really seeing the human as the sensors, right? Part of this industrial IoT that we are experiencing right now, which is booming out there. And we basically, in a very nutshell, not too sure how you're familiar with the so-called platform revolutions, but we were looking back and asking ourselves, how did the product evolve this last decade from, or let's put it like that, how the money moved from the product to the connected product, connectivity, and then to the services on top of the product. And we are like, okay, how some of these services that we bring today, they could be seen as managed services. Now, you can't really talk about marketplace as we are using here and there in regulated industries, because trust is the currency. And for this marketplace of services, you don't have that trust. So we are like, okay, how can we project ourselves and think about how these services could become a managed services marketplace, a set of services that will bring value to the healthcare, keeping in mind that, of course, that will require a better sensor network infrastructure than what is currently available in the healthcare industry. So anyway, reflecting on that and our technologies, we come up with a set of a domain where we could have an impact in the fight against the COVID. So again, we think, where is tacit knowledge taking or playing a key part in that fight in healthcare? Where is the system under pressure? Where is the missing information so that we could see the value of prediction? And basically, how the constraint moved due to the COVID, and things that appear like a commodity, right? You can easily access to an expert, will become very critical, very difficult to achieve, and where basically technology and managed services could play a key role. So we were not like, okay, we are talking about virtual consultation. No, we were more like let's talk about diagnostic and triage. We were more talking about remote monitoring solutions. We were more thinking about, like I said, data integration in a cyber secure way for managed services to build that trust. And then we come up with this kind of focus about enabling remote patient monitoring, maximize hospital capacities. I think we all have been reading about that these last few months. Assessing and scoring disease risk, streamlining scheduling in network hospitals, support decision in a very stressful environment, as experienced by the healthcare professional. And in the end, we came up with a kind of I had to say it was a kind of a little bit of leap of faith, right? Offering 5 propositions to the healthcare industry, kind of repurposing some of our technologies for healthcare, some of this technology coming from aerospace and defense. And we were quite surprised because the response was amazing. As I speak, actually, all of these propositions are under development, and some soon to be deployed. And again, we were talking with healthcare practitioners, and really all of them, they were like very excited by having these solutions coming to their industry, and really to amplify themselves, to help them actually to cope with the situation. And I think it was, again, a surprise to see that this kind of managed services that come with trust were really in demand in this industry, much more than what we thought. And probably because, as time flies, COVID-19 had an impact for sure. But I think that with the introduction of more and more sensors, and with the commodity trade-off changing in this industry in terms of constraints, new constraints, these services becomes more and more impactful. So to conclude, what we see right now is opportunities in healthcare for trust and managed intelligence services. That was a surprise. It comes as a surprise, but now it's definitely validated. We also see actually a lot of data-driven ecosystem, even among consumers. And I think this also is a criteria for managed services, kind of marketplace opportunities area. And what we also see is a need, definitely a need for better sensor network infrastructure than currently available in healthcare. We've seen that in other regulated industries, but I think that now many people, especially practitioners and the industry itself, realize that, probably a bit like we've seen years ago in airport industry. Now, what it takes to us, it takes first to start from the services. It starts to user experience in this very domain expert knowledge. You need to understand, you need to codify, you need to capture this decision process and make sure that you bring the right service with the right level of trust. Now, what we also think is that it takes to migrate from our traditional legacy business model. Like I said, medium to heavy industries have been a bit slow to leverage the platform revolution, the IoT revolution, and now the industrial IoT. But I think it's time to talk about business innovation and step into these new opportunities. And finally, I think we also acknowledge, and that was true, developing this 5 solution, connected and enhanced healthcare solution. It takes partnership to make sure that you do cover fully the connected and intelligence value chain, and bring this new currency, trust in healthcare, for enhanced experience as well. That's it for me. Stefan, back to you.
Thank you, Christophe. Great presentation, and 2 points that I think came across very clearly there was that Thales has a diverse amount of innovation outside of the core businesses that it's well defined by historically. And then beyond that is the importance of network in the model in order to deliver these services securely in a reliable fashion. Healthcare is an absolutely vital, critical part of all of our lives. And to have these kind of innovations exist and to have them on a secure, reliable network is absolutely paramount. With that, I'm going to switch over to a quick poll from our audience. And what you're going to see on your screen is the poll, and then I'm going to read out the result. You finish the poll. For our first poll, telehealth services currently available in your country. This should be an easy one if you can just answer yes or no. And we'll just give you a few seconds to do that. And I'm going to now read the poll results. It looks like approximately 74% of you on today's session have telehealth or e-medicine related solutions in your geography, your territory, or region today. With that, I'd like to introduce Amy Cameron, Senior Analyst for Digital Health Research Lead at STL Partners. Amy, it's wonderful to have you on today's session.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and it's great to be here. So now that we've heard from Christophe about some of the really advanced use cases for AI within healthcare, I'm going to dial back a little bit and look at where the digital health industry is now and how telcos are playing in it and what the real opportunity is for them going forward. So just to give a little bit of a background, this is stuff that you will have seen before, but to position where we are for the market for telcos. This is a chart on the left that I'm sure everyone has seen in one format or another over the last few years, but the reality is that for operators, revenues are slowing in all markets, in fixed and mobile. And so what that means is that they need to find new sources of revenue growth. They need to find new ways to innovate. The problem is that this is really difficult for telcos. And just to illustrate the point of how difficult it is for telcos to innovate and drive new services, I've got this chart on the bottom left, which compares the telecoms industry to some internet giants. So on the left-hand side, we have the total industry revenues from 165 telecoms operators. And you can see that's more than double the revenues of selected internet giants, Tencent, Alibaba, Microsoft, et cetera, on the right-hand side. And that was a couple years out, but telcos are probably, that picture is still the same, effectively. On the right-hand side, however, you have the market capitalization of telcos versus selected internet giants. And what you can see is that investors value telcos less, despite them having larger revenues than the internet giants. And that's because they are not well known for innovating. They have outsourced a lot of their R&D to network equipment providers, and they don't do a lot of that internally. So it's a difficult time for telcos to say we need to drive new revenues, but we're not known for innovating. So that's the conundrum that the industry is in. So STL Partners, we've done a lot of thinking about how can telcos overcome this? What do they need to do in order to build new value beyond pure connectivity? And basically what we believe is that they need to take a greater vertical focus in where they're playing, and they need to think really carefully within that vertical about how they are playing, what role are they playing. So in terms of the vertical industry focus, we were thinking, who are you serving? And a lot of the time that's, figuring out which vertical is right for you as a telco, depending on the industry or the market that you're playing in. And as you can see, healthcare, the subject of the day, is one of many industries that telcos might focus on. Once they're focused on that, they then need to think about what are you doing for those customers. So obviously, they're offering connectivity solutions, and this is happening increasingly as a network as a service, customized cloud-like networks, faster provisioning, more on-demand services. The next layer up is application enablement. So providing some kind of platform, whether that's for data sharing, whether it includes other APIs around security, around access to other telco services, billing, what have you. But telcos have many assets that they might use for application enablement across those verticals. Finally, and usually where the biggest value tends to lie is in the applications and solutions, the actual solutions for the vertical industry. And we're going to dive into that a little bit in the healthcare context today. But the big message is that telcos cannot do it all. They don't have the resources to be able to play everywhere and be everyone to everything. Because their resources are limited, they need to figure out really where they can add the best value. And so hopefully we'll have a little bit of a think about that in the healthcare context today. So diving in a little bit more into healthcare, obviously we can't ignore the current scenario that we are in with the COVID-19 pandemic. And what I've got on this slide is results from a survey that STL Partners did, where we were trying to understand in the telecoms industry, how is the current environment of people working from home, of big pressure on telcos networks, how is that changing your investment priorities? And we asked them questions across, many different parts of network technologies and services they're offering. And these are the results from questions about specific vertical focus. And what you can see is that across every region where we got responses from the industry, digital health came out as an area where telcos expect to increase their investment, to increase their focus on this vertical. So it's an attractive market for telcos, and they're starting to think about it more seriously in the current context. And this is not surprising at all, because healthcare, like every other industry, has had to go virtual. And what that means is that, particularly in the immediate aftermath of social distancing regulations or guidelines, people have had to see their doctors virtually wherever possible. And just as an example of how this is affecting the industry, I have here a chart from Teladoc, which is one of the leading virtual consultation software providers in the US. And you can see that in the first quarter of 2020, that the number of visits that it enabled nearly doubled compared to the previous year and grew. So it's looking like a very promising time for digital health. A lot of the barriers are coming down, so telcos are see it as an interesting vertical for themselves, and it is growing strongly. But I think that what I want to highlight is that actually, telcos' interest in this vertical and their right to play is not solely based around what's happening now. It is actually a really positive or promising vertical for telcos with strong fundamentals already. And we've seen telcos' interest in this market grow over the last couple of years. So thinking first about the market attractiveness, why is this a good vertical for telcos to choose to focus on based on all of the ones that they might choose to focus on? First, it's a sustainable market. So that means that, a lot of consumer trends, think about AR or VR, stuff like that. It's hard to predict exactly how popular it's going to be with consumers, how long it's going to last, what it's going to look like. By contrast, healthcare needs are always going to exist. These are not going away. It's a priority for every country, for every human being. Healthcare is important, and that's never going to change. And I think the other element of it being a sustainable market is that the demographics. So most countries are facing aging populations, and older people tend to have more chronic diseases to manage, and that's very costly for healthcare systems. And so there's going to have to be, use of digital solutions to manage those chronic diseases in aging populations more effectively. The second element is that there's actually a really low level of digitization in healthcare, and I'm sure this comes as no surprise to anybody who's tried to access their medical records or, tried to do anything digital with the formal healthcare sector. So that means that getting involved in supporting this transformation in the healthcare sector is part of a long journey. We're at the beginning of a 20, 30-year journey in the healthcare sector. And finally, which I alluded to before, is what we're seeing right now is really rapidly falling barriers to digital healthcare. So, for example, one of the main barriers has been around funding for virtual versus in-person services. And what we've seen in countries like the US and Canada and Australia is finally insurers and healthcare funders, whether that's a universal system or private insurers, are starting to compensate doctors for virtual consultations at the same price they would for an in-person consultation. And that makes it a more financially viable service for doctors. And we're also seeing, for instance, if you take countries like South Korea, where virtual consultations were not legal until now. And so some of the, bans on types of services are starting to come down. And finally, because they have to, people are getting used to it. So in terms of workflows and patient and doctor acceptance, that's all rising because we have to. And that's I've highlighted it in bold because that's one of the things that has changed over the last few months. So that's on the market attractiveness side. If we think about telco's right to play, obviously all this digital health stuff is dependent on telco infrastructure. And I think that Chris will go into this in a lot more detail about the value of reliable and secure networks. But the reality is that we know we've all been on Zoom a lot recently. We all know that it crashes or that the internet doesn't work and it cuts out. And that is okay for stuff that is about wellness, but is a lot worse for stuff that's about healthcare. You don't want to get cut off mid-conversation with your doctor, or you don't want them, if you're using a remote health monitoring solution that's tracking vitals or tracking an elderly person to make sure that they're okay, you don't want that connection to be disrupted. This is a matter of people's health and their well-being and their lives. And so the importance of really strong, secure, reliable connectivity cannot be overstated in healthcare. And obviously telcos have that role to play. Secondly, healthcare is an extremely nationally bound market. The structure of the market, who pays for services, how it's funded, how it's delivered, regulatory priorities around what type of digital healthcare things are important to that country, they really occur on a country by country basis. And telcos have really struggled to compete with global level services, especially in the consumer space where things are, developed and offered at a global level, and telcos can't compete there. And they may not compete on the developing the digital health technology, but on the implementation, they know their national markets, they know their local regulators, they know how the national health system is set up. And that is a serious advantage when it comes to healthcare. And finally, brand awareness and longevity. Telcos are trusted, they're known in their markets. If you think about things like data security in healthcare, are you more likely to trust a global brand where they might be storing your data anywhere, or a locally regulated telco? And if you're buying some kind of healthcare service, you want to be sure that it's going to be there next year, particularly within the formal healthcare sector where it takes a long time to make a decision about what IT to buy. And when they buy it, they want it to make sure it's going to be there in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And telcos can offer that level of support in a way that might be more difficult for digital health companies that are not already well known in a country. So there we go. It's an attractive market and telcos have a strong right to play. So it's a good choice for them in terms of a focus area. The thing is, though, that in order to succeed in healthcare, it's quite a slow-moving industry, despite the fast changes that we've seen now, and it's a very heavily regulated industry. So telcos need to think beyond the immediate opportunity of, oh, wow, there's a boom in virtual care needs. There's a boom in virtual consultations. Let's just go do that. They need to think long-term about what does the healthcare system need and be prepared to be in there for the long time. So thinking a little bit about what is the healthcare sector going to need if it's not always just going to be virtual consultations. I have here a chart which looks a little bit at sort of the different trends around the COVID pandemic. So in the blue line, the light blue line, phase 1, you have this really rapid adoption of virtual consultations as everybody can no longer go see their doctor in person, so they're speaking to them on the phone, they're doing it through video chat. And that hits a peak, and then as social distancing is relaxed, we're going to see that tail off a little bit, and probably not down to the same level it was before, but people are going to want to go back to see their doctor in person. And basically, I think what we're going to see is we're going to have a stronger understanding of what works well over the phone, over video chat, what you really need to see your doctor in person for, and that's going to even out. The second phase, phase 2 in the red line, is what we're seeing is in hospital increased use of virtual care solutions. And that might be some kind of IoT monitoring device, as well as, video chatting within the hospital in order to abide by social distancing and to protect hospital staff as they're caring for people who have the COVID virus. And that is likely to tail off as well. But again, having gone through the difficulty of implementing these remote monitoring solutions in the hospital, they are then going to continue to be useful. For instance, if you have a nurse with an iPad that has devices monitoring many patients at a time, that nurse can be far more effective and work far more quickly and monitor many more patients than they could if they had to see everyone in person all the time. And that is going to be really important for phase 3, which is, we're just starting to see some data come out now about the potential risk, but lots of people have deferred seeing their doctor. A lot of elective surgeries and care has been deferred as healthcare systems have been, dealing with the pandemic. And that's all going to need to be delivered at some point. And so we're going to see a huge pressure come onto the healthcare system in the aftermath as they try to catch up with this. And while they try to do that catch up, using the digital tools that can enable them to be far more effective is going to be really important. So what we're saying to telcos is it's not just about virtual consultations. They need to think more broadly about what the healthcare system needs and how can they help. Alongside that, telcos also need to think carefully about the challenges that come with playing in healthcare. So one of these is understanding the local healthcare challenges. And, we've just discussed that a little bit, but it might also be around particular regulations or area of focus for governments on what they want to do in healthcare. Second, having a commitment to health that's more than just a business. And we've seen this a little bit before. If a telco is, offering a virtual care solution, there may be a tendency at the beginning to distrust they're not in it just for the money if they haven't built a narrative around it and said, this is more than just making money. We are committed to improving healthcare outcomes. We want, we're not making any more money from this than anyone else would. We're here to help improve the healthcare delivery system in our country and to be a good corporate citizen. And I think that's an important narrative to reassure their partners in the healthcare system and the patients. Third, preparing for more stringent regulations in healthcare. And, telcos have a lot of experience with this, but healthcare data is even another level of sensitivity from the personal data telcos are already handling. So being prepared to abide by those regulations. Fourth, patience for a slow-moving industry. So even though we've seen some leaps and bounds and, the digital health community is saying that, we've moved forward 5 years or more in a very short period of time due to the COVID pandemic. But that doesn't mean that everything is going to move forward faster from now on. I think we're going to see a go back to normal pace of things, especially as healthcare systems are overwhelmed. So be prepared for a slow moving industry. And finally, finding the right business model and partner. Where exactly should you play, and what kind of partners do you need in order to play that role? And that's what we're going to dive into in a bit more depth in the second half of this presentation. So, how can telcos help deliver digital health solutions? What are the business models that are available to them in this space? So, as I mentioned before, we see sort of three layers where players can, or where telcos can participate: at the connectivity layer, at the application enablement layer, and the actual applications. So let's go through some of the business models at each of those layers. In connectivity, there's basically two big things that we're seeing. One, which pretty much all telcos are already doing, is providing connectivity to healthcare organizations, you know, whether that's to hospitals or care homes or local councils, providing them with their fixed and mobile connectivity needs for their business as usual. The next one, which we're starting to see more and more of, particularly among telcos that have a strong IoT play, is supporting medical device companies that want to integrate connectivity into their solutions that they're providing. So, you know, whether that is, you know, a wearable for an elderly person who is, you know, at risk of wandering outside of their house, you want to know where they've gone, if they have gone anywhere, or if that's about some kind of drug tracking solution. So there are many different things, and I'll give a couple of examples of those later. At the application enablement layer, there's a lot telcos can do, but the biggest single issue in healthcare is secure messaging. And that's because you have a really disparate healthcare market between the hospitals, the labs, the GPs, the pharmacies, the patients, and many others. And they all need to share information about patients all the time. And they need secure messaging to do that, specific type, you know, lots of different types of messaging for different types of lab work or different types of patient data. And this is an area where many telcos are playing, and I'll go into that with a few examples of that a bit later. But as I mentioned, there's also a lot of security that goes on here, or billing integrations potentially, access to APIs. So there are a number of different application enablement things telcos can do beyond secure messaging. And what I just want to highlight here, and I think that Chris will probably go into this in more detail later, but as we start to see telcos move their services towards the cloud and we start to see 5G come out, we may see a bit of blurring between these areas. You know, for instance, with network slicing, if you get a specific slice for all your IoT devices as a medical device company, then you can quickly add on, you know, other things around security or latency or what have it that you need, which may be seen as an application enablement, but is very closely tied to the network service when it becomes more cloud-like. And finally, there are the actual applications. And there are so many different digital health applications. But here I've got a few different business models that we've seen telcos pursue, and I'll just go through them quickly. So on the left-hand side, we have a B2B providing a health IT solution, and that's really a health ICT play. And telcos that have made a big bet on healthcare have acquired companies in this space and are offering solutions directly to hospitals, GPs, pharmacies. Next up, we have being a B2B channel for digital health companies. And this happens when, say you're a telco and you have a really strong relationship with the Ministry of Health, or with hospitals, or, you know, with the healthcare organizations in your country, and they come to you and say, oh, you already provide us, you know, this connectivity for this service, but we need something additional. We want to do some remote monitoring. Can you do that for us? Because it's, you know, very connectivity based. In that instance, you might have a telecoms operator partner with a digital health company in order to deliver that solution to their client. Third, you have a sort of B2B2C service where a telco may be delivering something directly to a patient, but it is funded by an insurance provider or by a universal healthcare provider. and the technology is created by a digital health company. And we're going to dive into one of those examples a bit later, so I won't dwell on it too long. The final two are more where the person paying for the service is the consumer or the patient. And in the lighter red box, that's about the telco being a channel for a digital health company. So a digital health company that is not well known in the market, and the telco can use their marketing channels and their brand credibility in order to get that out to consumers. And finally, the last one is a direct B2C service that is also developed by the telco internally. So just to bring these to life a little bit more, I have some examples of what telcos have done in all of these areas. So if we start at the connectivity layer, two examples that I think are good in terms of the connectivity is you have AT&T has partnered with a company called Astute that makes a sort of a hub that goes in the home and connects to many already FDA approved, clinically approved medical sensors, and gathers all that data and connects it into the formal healthcare sector, into electronic medical records. And what AT&T does is it provides a really easy and reliable cellular connectivity, so it doesn't require a difficult setup. Similarly, Vodafone does a very similar thing with a company called Teruz in Spain, where they offer built-in SIM connectivity for a wearable for an elderly person. So this is a wearable for an elderly person who might have dementia and is, liable to wander off. And Vodafone offers built-in SIM connectivity so that the person who's wearing it, who's not tech savvy, doesn't have to think about any kind of setup. It comes pre-connected reliably. Another example is recently, Dialog Axiata in Sri Lanka has partnered with Samsung, which is the device maker, and My Doctor, which is the digital health company, to provide reliable 4G connectivity for remote health monitoring solutions that are being deployed across a number of hospitals. And finally, another example, Tele2 has partnered with a digital health company called Guavus in Sweden. And one of the things that they offer is a VPN for virtual consultations. So they're offering, something a little bit heavier on top of just basic connectivity. Now, if we go into the application enablement and stay with the Tele2 and Guavus example, other things that Tele2 offers through its IoT platforms are two-factor authentication for security, as well as location finding using its network information for location, which can be more reliable than GPS. As I mentioned, secure messaging is another really big example, and KPN in the Netherlands, as well as Telus in Canada, are both examples of telcos that play in this market and offer secure messaging to EMR providers in the country and health organizations across the country. And another example of what KPN does is that it also has a platform as a service for in-hospital applications. So, a hospital might have hundreds of different IT applications, and it has a solution that is a platform that brings all of those together in one place. Now, in terms of some actual end user applications, Telstra is a big player in the health IT market in Australia, as well as elsewhere, and they do loads of things. So the IT for pharmacies, electronic health records for hospitals, patient flow managing, and medical device monitoring, and these are all done internally through companies that it has acquired. An example of the next one is Telia in Sweden had a strong relationship with a hospital, and they wanted to roll out remote monitoring for COPD and heart disease. And they partnered with digital health company Taxio to develop that technology. And Taxio is a global player. They partner with telcos as well as, lots of other players in the digital health market to deliver remote monitoring solutions. Now, a third example of that sort of B2B2C complex arrangement is Telus and Babylon Health. So Babylon Health is a virtual consultations company, and we're going to dive into this example in a bit more further detail in a minute. But basically, they do something called Telus by Babylon, where they offer virtual care consultations directly to patients. So patients can, download the app and access it on their phones. The technology is done by Babylon. The distribution is done by TELUS. And the payment is done by the universal healthcare system in the provinces where it's being offered. Going more to the B2C arrangement. So this is another KPN service. It's called Vital. And what they've done is they have a solution which is motion sensors that get set up around a person's house and monitor their movements around the house, that they can understand if there's anything abnormal in the way that the person is living. They can tell if the person has taken a fall or might have injured themselves and send alerts to the carer, whether that's, a professional carer or someone in their family. And that technology, the AI technology that monitors people's movements around the house, is done by a partner, but the solution is sold by KPN. And finally, the direct to consumer. I've got a couple of examples here, but I'll just, do the Globe Telecom one, where Globe Telecom has started offering an employee health check to chatbot to its employees, so that they can monitor their health during the COVID pandemic. And that's the type of thing that telcos could offer, more directly to a wider B2C audience. So hopefully that will give you, a really good lay of the land of what telcos can do and the types of services they can offer. And I will just, in the final few minutes, dive into the TELUS and Babylon example in a little bit more depth, so you can understand what role TELUS plays and what role the partner plays. So as I said, it's a partnership between TELUS, which is a Canadian telecoms company. They operate nationally, fixed and mobile. And about 10 years ago, they started making investments into the healthcare market and have made, I think, about $3 billion Canadian dollars worth of acquisitions. And they're the biggest health IT provider in Canada. So they have built up a lot of expertise in healthcare over that time. Babylon Health is a healthcare technology company originally based in the UK, but they operate in many countries in the world now. And basically what they offer is, I've got a little example here from them, which is a patient-facing virtual care solution. So what it does is it starts off by, you open the app and it says, good afternoon, how can I help you? What's wrong with you? And you speak to an AI-supported chat function that sort of understands what your health issue might be and does sort of a preliminary diagnosis about what might be wrong with you. So it's a kind of AI-powered information source in terms of understanding what your healthcare issue may be. From there, once they've done sort of that initial triage level, they then can organize a direct virtual consultation with the doctor. So in the UK, they work with the NHS, and in Canada, they work with the provincial health services to put you in touch with a doctor who can then discuss that issue in more depth with you and, think about any prescriptions that you might need afterwards. So that's what the service is. How do they work together? So first, what TELUS brings to the equation is trusted relationships with the government. So the government knows TELUS. They've been in contact with all the different provincial governments. In Canada, there are 10 provinces and 3 territories, and TELUS knows how to navigate each one of those. And that's something that would be difficult for Babylon to do without a partner who's local in the country. And so that's sort of the the introductory level element of what TELUS can do. Babylon, on the other hand, brings in really deep clinical expertise in healthcare delivery, understanding what is the patient journey and what are the requirements that we need to offer, what is the relationship between patients and doctors, and combines that with the best-in-class global technology. So, they're not developing this technology just for one market. They have developed it for several markets globally, and they have a lot of experience of working at scale and, implementing this over time. Next, what TELUS brings is its brand awareness and marketing locally. So, it's a well-known telecoms brand. It has a whole, power behind it to deliver services across the whole country. Finally, next it has, distribution over its networks. So it has, networks across the entire country, which these services rely on. And because it has a lot of experience working in the healthcare market, and telcos have this even without working in the healthcare market, but it is aware of the challenges in particular and additional security needs of working in the healthcare market, it really knows what it takes to deliver a medical grade, network-based privacy and security in terms of the connectivity that it's offering to Babylon. And then finally, the next thing that Babylon brings is, as I said, the ability to scale operations quickly. So for instance, in the COVID pandemic, this solution went from being available in one province to being available in 3 in a matter of a couple of months. And that's likely to expand again very quickly. And Babylon is able to handle that. And then also, they're also thinking about, it's not just about the triage and the virtual consultation, but what happens next? What about managing prescriptions afterwards? They're making referrals to specialists afterwards. And Babylon is really thinking about this consumer journey or patient journey holistically, which helps to develop the service further. So then finally, what this delivers is, Babylon is helping TELUS get into new healthcare markets in terms of breadth of service. And TELUS also operates internationally with its healthcare platform, which it sells to other telecoms operators globally. And so TELUS can also help Babylon enter new geographies potentially through the other telcos that it is in discussions with. So you can see that, partnering isn't the only way to do it, but it is one of the fundamentals of delivering something successful and valuable in the healthcare market. And I think that Chris will go into this in a bit more detail, but really the networks and the reliability and the security is one of the big pluses besides the local market knowledge that the telco can bring. So with that, I think you've probably all heard enough of my voice. So thank you very much. And I will pass on to our next presenter.
Amy, thank you very much for that great presentation. What impresses me is the amount of volume of healthcare solutions that are being driven by telecommunications. I'm sure this didn't just happen overnight related to the pandemic, and there's been many, many years of planning and scoping this market, as healthcare is one of the largest industries in the world's economy and absolutely vital to the success of every nation. So exciting that telecom could play a critical role in this evolution, if you will, of how we get care both at home and at the hospital. So fantastic and much appreciated. Thank you. With that, I'm going to show another poll. Poll number 2. In which areas do you see the greatest challenge in providing secure, reliable telecommunications for telehealth services? Many of you are network operators, MNOs, MSOs on the line. Is it technology limitation? Is it infrastructure requirements, systems and processes, or regulatory demands? So please select the item in which you think is the greatest challenge in providing secure, reliable telecommunications for telehealth services. Okay, and we will stop the poll. And it looks like, systems and processes and regulatory demands are almost tied with the lion's share of the respondees. Infrastructure requirements just behind that. Thank you very much for participating in that poll. And with that, I'd like to now introduce Chris Neisinger, who's our field CTO from Guavus. Chris, it's welcome to the call, and excited to hear what you have to say, that insider's view on network operations and the impact of reliability, security, and scale to support healthcare-related businesses.
Thanks, Stephen. So both Christoph and Amy talked about some need for security and reliability in a communication solution to run these products and services that they mentioned. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Security and reliability are really outcomes of this end-to-end process that involves looking at technology, infrastructure, systems, and processes. So as we look across all these, the way you get a secure and security and privacy and reliability is really looking across all of this. And security is more than just encryption across the network. You have the questions of, I am who I say I am, you are who you say you are. So there's this authentication side. And there's also the privacy of the data itself and the metadata, the fact that the conversation is even happening. So it is a very complex topic to say something secure and private, because it also has to be obfuscated. And so telcos are in a great position to understand. They've been doing this for years, and they understand it well. Security is not just an add-on that you do at the end, where you just bolt something on and say now it's secure. It really has to be thought of as you go through this process of looking at technology infrastructure and the systems and processes. Similarly, reliability is more than just saying something is 5 nines. It encompasses this quality and location. That it's a system or a service is reliable if it works where I want it to work, it works when I need it to work, and it works as I expect it to work. So there's a quality aspect to reliability. Again, it's an end-to-end process of looking at all these pillars. So the first pillar is technology, and it's not sufficient to just say I'm building a 5G network so it will be secure, reliable, and private. 5G has some great capabilities. I think Amy mentioned the use of mobile edge compute and network slicing. So 5G does bring some great capabilities in that, but you have to look at also the infrastructure itself, how it's deployed, the geography that it's deployed in, because networks are not uniform everywhere, and they're that way for a reason. You have big cities, you have rural areas, you have urban areas, and infrastructure is deployed to match the population densities. And sometimes a 4G solution or a fiber to the home solution is technically feasible, and others it's not. And so that infrastructure has to be taken into account as well. So those are the first two, technology and infrastructure. Those are just table stakes. The real differentiation comes, and I think that was what the poll mentioned as well. It's in systems and processes, and that's where the big differentiators are made in how systems are built. The key about systems and processes is how to create a system for operational excellence. These networks are very complex, and as you bring in capabilities like network slicing and start managing hundreds and thousands of slices, the ability to manage those slices with just humans looking at the problems, it just doesn't scale. So that drives a complexity, and this complexity drives the need for intelligent automation and specifically AI and ML for the delivery of services, performance, reliability, and security. So I'm going to talk about 4 or 5 of these: use of behavioral analytics, multivariate issue detection, some AI and ML triage and remediation, and then predictive operations. So we're looking at this in this closed loop context of detecting issues, finding root causes and remediating them, and then also predicting so that they can be prevented. So if you can predict an issue is about to happen, you can actually prevent it from happening, and you don't have to go into the remediation. So it's a full closed loop process. So the first of these is, this is a classic behavioral analytics for finding root causes. So there's, millions of events that are going on constantly in networks. Through behavioral analytics, we're able to separate those events into families, and each family can be looked at independently. And within each family, we're able to, through, again, behavioral analytics and other processes, we're able to create a relationship tree that finds the roots and the branches of those activities that are going on. And the goal of this is to figure which of the activities or events is the root cause or likely root cause. So this is an automated triage that goes on in the background, does not require topology of the network to solve this. This is all behavior of the events interacting with each other, and that information can then be put in a smart trouble ticket and delivered to the engineer who is looking to resolve a problem. So this is operational excellence in dealing with issues that have happened on the network to more quickly remediate them. Another very interesting example of the use of AI and machine learning is real complex anomaly detection and fault correlation. Again, since the networks are so complex with network slicing, the interaction of one layer across another, whether it be the RAN layer, a transport layer, or a slice itself or an application, issues in one layer can impact issues in the other layer. And again, for early detection, we choose to look across all the layers simultaneously to find the relationships between things and predict outcomes. A telco example of this that I like to use is the example of a symphony. So if you have a symphony, the conductor has a score that has all of the parts of the different instruments. You have the violin players and the French horn players. You have all the parts, and only the conductor really sees them all in his score and can see the interplay. Each individual layer, the violins have the violin part, and they simply play their part, and they're listening to their neighbors, but they're concentrating on their layer. And so the ability to have this score that looks across all the layers, it's very easy for the conductor to see the interplay between them. So when you go take that same analogy into Telecom's network, a small anomaly on a transport layer, from a transport layer perspective, may be fine. There's automation to reroute packets, and that transport layer is just continues to run. However, that anomaly on the transport layer may also be correlated with anomaly on a application layer or in a specific slice, and the ability to correlate those can indicate a impending fault or impending incident. And so this complex multi-domain, multivariate issue detection is very important in predicting issues that are about to come, or predicting issues without waiting for instance, network alarms that may come 10, 20 minutes later. A third process that's kind of a combination of the two is this multi-domain root cause tied with a likely fix. So in the issue here, a alarm is detected, or a multi-layer issue is detected, and there is a root cause that's identified through the behavioral analytics, and a prospective likely fix to that. All of this is done with the the AI agent within the system. But the key to this is that computers are very good at detecting patterns and doing multi-domain mathematics. Humans are very bad at that. Humans, however, are very good at intuition, understanding what I should do next just from a gut feel. And computers are terrible at that. They don't do it at all. So this is a combination of tying the two together, where the computer systems can detect and show the multi-domain likely root issue and a solution. Once a solution is implemented, it's also easy for the system to score that. And so what we do is we take the result of the solution and measure things like the time to resolve it, the number of customers that were impacted, how long it takes the quality to come back to a certain point. And that can all be put into a complex scoring algorithm, and that solution can be scored so that the next time the likely cause comes up and a solution is selected, that can also be scored. And through machine learning, the systems can learn what is the best solution to the problem. When the precision and recall gets high enough, that solution can be implemented into a complete closed loop solution and without the human intervention, and you can go right into through APIs into a provisioning system and enact the solution, or a remote process automated system to automatically fix that problem. But again, that's when the precision and recall gets high enough that the solution is deemed the perfect solution to solve the problem. I think there will always be this mix of a human in the loop and full and closed loop. It's not waiting until we can go closed loop for everything. We'll always have new types of problems that require that human intuition. And then finally, this concept of predictive operations. The previous three slides, I was showing examples of how to create operational excellence around outages and resolution to outages to keep systems reliable. This one is a predictive operations. There's many of these, but this one I chose is really about how to keep systems highly available. It's through preventative maintenance and just-in-time maintenance. The preventative maintenance is to prevent things from failing. The just-in-time maintenance is to really take into account the margins that need to be created in this network, so that you can make equipment run as long as possible. Keep your capital efficient. So maintenance is a cost, but it's also a something that you do to extend the life of an asset. It's kind of like maintaining your car. You don't have to change the oil if you don't want to. You can just buy a new car every time the oil dries up and your engine breaks, or you can spend the time to do maintenance on your vehicle to make it last longer. You can also be ridiculous and change your oil every month, and that's just an extra cost that's unnecessary. So this predictive operation is really trying to figure out what is the best time for the elements to be maintained, and how to maintain them in ways that will lead to the highest reliability of the hardware itself, and also the preventative for preventing outages. So again, this is a very good use of operations analytics to look at things like syslog data and performance data of all the elements to predict when devices are about to fail. Very, very effective use of AI. So to kind of wrap this section up, secure and reliable communications really come through a combination of technology, infrastructure, systems, and processes. The huge complexity is really what drives the need for AI and ML in your operations to deliver. What the objective is to deliver. Services, performance, reliability, and security in a way that meets the needs of these very, very demanding healthcare solutions that Amy and Christoph talked about. So with that, Stephen, I'll hand that back to you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Much appreciated. As I was watching your presentation, listening, one of the things that strikes me is that obviously security is absolutely critical. And, I think that's just a known, very well-known fact. If you're going to transact secure information related to healthcare, there's also some regulatory compliance you need to be able to abide by, and that's just smart. But, as somebody who sits on a lot of video conference calls, that jitter in the video is really annoying. I can imagine if you're sitting behind broadband connection or mobile connection and you're trying to have a interaction with a healthcare provider, and it's important, right? You need to be able to express yourself over the video link or over the voice, and to be able to get the same kind of response back with that in that interaction. So obviously the ability to support that from a technology perspective, make sure that the patients have reliable access is critical. And then incumbent upon the provider, the telecom operator, in order to ensure that customer's experience is reliable, secure, and allows them to communicate on that very critical call. With that, I'm just going to run another poll real quick. It's my final poll. For telehealth and many other services, do you feel that operational analytics can improve your network security, service assurance and reliability, OpEx cost reductions, or improving customer experience? Again, for telehealth and many other services, do you feel that operational analytics can improve your network security, service assurance and reliability, OpEx cost reduction, and improving customer experience? And I'll just end the poll. And it looks like improving customer experience has topped the charts, with service assurance and reliability close behind. And that, obviously that speaks to even my comment made earlier that, if you're going to be able to conduct a secure care visit across the internet or gain access to important healthcare related information, you need to make sure that experience is sound. We have some great questions that have come across in the chat while we were speaking. I'd like to see if Chris and Amy can address a few of these. The first question I have are there any additional data privacy measures that service providers should consider in addition to network security to prevent potential issues? What other measures do you think are important related to data privacy? And the role of the CSP, I guess, more precisely. Amy or Chris, feel free.
So let me talk a little bit about that. So, as I was mentioning, that the network has a lot of information about the customer interaction, more than just the application layer. So one of the things that the network operator has, I think Amy mentioned this as well with one of her discussions of one of the products, is the location of the communication event, especially in the wireless networks. The applications can have a GPS and report their location, but that application can be hacked and can incorrectly report location, or something can be going wrong. The transport layer on the telecom network, essentially cannot be hacked. I mean, they know what cell site the communication started from, and that information, is highly accurate. So the ability to use, location in security aspects, context of location and security, where, a conversation can be happening between a doctor and their patient, and if it's in one country and all of a sudden the network says, well, that conversation is not in one country, that's actually you could track that through the network side. That can be an indication of a security breach or issues with security. So I think the network provider has a lot of information that can be borne out on increased security. And if you take that to the next layer of slices within an application, if you have an IoT slice for a medical device, again, that the information that medical device is sending has a destination where it's supposed to go. It's supposed to go to the Mayo Clinic, and the systems, the slice can be set up with a highly restrictive policy, so that is the only thing that happens. And so again, you can provide another layer of security through the use of technology, not through just a bolt-on on the application. So the combination of the application security and the network security is really some things that the telecom provider can bring to bear to make a much more secure solution.
Obviously, you don't want someone bombing your video conference call with your doctor if you're talking about your rash. You want to be talking about it's in private, secure, with all the compliance measures around it. You don't need an intruder or any kind of infiltration, I'm assuming. So I've got another question, maybe more appropriate in the interest of time, for Amy. Amy, what are the top innovations in the digital health space with regards to 5G? Where do we go from here, I guess? Where do we go from here as 5G emerges? What are the top innovations to look out for digital health?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think that on top of some of the security things that Chris just discussed, I think that it's helpful to think of 5G more as a little bit of an evolution than necessarily as a standalone thing, right? So a lot of the things that we might want to do now are possible on 4G. You know, like we're having video calls and consultations. You can do it on a 4G mobile network. If you want to be doing some kind of remote monitoring, whether, you know, something on your body that needs to be tracked no matter where you are, not just in your house on the Wi-Fi, we can do that with current technology. But where 5G really comes into play is that if, you know, as we expect, these things become really widely adopted, maybe not in 5 years, but in sort of a 10-year time frame and plus, there's just going to be a current network could not handle it. It would just be overflown, it would be too much. So with the number of devices that we would expect could be valuable to the healthcare system in order to monitor patients, you know, you think there's millions and millions of chronic diseases out there. Each one might have a few sensors to make sure people are taking their drugs at the time prescribed properly. And then on top of that, people want to do an HD video call, not necessarily just at home, but when they're away somewhere and they want to be able to, you know, show something on my skin and that you can see properly. All of that level of demand is going to require 5G. So we think that, you know, looking at some of the use cases, the broad buckets where we think that there's going to be big demand that is going to require more powerful networks is in remote monitoring and in high definition virtual consultations. Now there's one more, which is a little bit of a, you know, might take a little bit longer to come through, but which is really a, you know, perfect 5G use case, which is the connected ambulance, where you think that, you know, someone is in an ambulance and the paramedics could be live feed into the hospital in order to be able to prepare the hospital for a patient who is arriving so that when they arrive, they can be, you know, the doctors are there right away and ready to go with what they need. But likewise, that the doctors can communicate to the paramedics and see what's going on so the paramedics can deliver additional care than they might be able to without the support of the experts from the hospital that are, you know, still 20 minutes away. And so that's going to maybe take a little bit longer to, you know, iron out all the kinks. But from 5G perspective, it is definitely dependent on a mobile network. It's moving around an urban landscape, and it's going to require a lot of bandwidth and high security. So, you know, really a top use case, even though it's a smaller part of the market than the other two.
That's fast. Those are fascinating times. We're living in fascinating times, and those are fascinating approaches to improve the quality of care, whether it be a one-on-one with your doctor, monitoring the various peripherals that are related to the health experience, or that very urgent care-oriented scenario where, you know, your doctor needs real-time information in the most critical of senses. Great examples, and it gets enabled. That's, you know, you're right on, in my opinion, right, with a, you know, ultra reliable, low latency connectivity for those devices, and to have that high density, high quality video experience. You're not going to get it on, you know, your old network. It's going to be the new. So, Amy and Chris, I want to thank you for being our panelists today, along with Christophe Marotet. We appreciate all of your insights and all the wisdom that you've brought to this session. We thank you again, our audience, for participating in our polls and the many questions that you had for us. Please expect a follow-up from us and a survey as to how well we did today on our session. In addition, you'll be available to download the slides and access the recording on demand after today's event. Thank you again, Amy, Chris, and Christophe. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to working with you in the future on the very next web session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.